All right, guys. So yeah, we're back again with iGaming Exchange. Nice to see everyone who is watching this recording. It's so strange for us when we are doing these recordings or live streams because we are basically staring into the abyss because we don't know who is on the other side. So make sure to send a message or something, a comment if you like these videos. Before we get started with the dynamic trio, a new study, actually, before we got started with this recording, a new study came out from Vantage Point, which has revealed that how deeply AI systems are reshaping emotional life in the United States. And especially as loneliness, digital attachment, and technological familiarity collide, it's interesting that this finding shows that 28% of adults claim that they have at least one intimate or romantic relationship with an AI, and adults over 60 years and older, such as Martin Lycka on our call here, and are more likely to consider intimate relationship with AI, and they are not considering it as a cheating. So there's the study also find that more than half of Americans claim to have some kind of relationship with an AI system. ChatGPT being number one, Amazon Alexa number two, Apple Siri number four, and Google's Gemini only fourth. So these adults are currently in successful relationships and are more likely to pursue an intimate or romantic relationship with an artificial intelligence. So this is, guys, I wanted to share this because it's so bizarre reading this at the end of the year and hosting this final edition, this 2025 of the iGaming Exchange, which focuses on the US market. So yeah, I will not take further time away from you guys. Jeremy, I think you're the moderator as usual for this panel. So take it away.
Hey, Sultan. Thanks for having us back. As always, it's a pleasure doing this every quarter with my two pals, Martin and Bill. I'll let them say hello, but I just want to comment on one thing about what you just said about AI. It makes perfect sense, right? Because AI, you don't have to buy it dinner. It doesn't cheat on you. It doesn't talk back. It actually is the perfect intimate relationship. So not that I'm speaking from experience, but just a few things to think about. Hi, guys. Hey, Bill, Martin. Good to see you guys.
Hey, Jeremy.
Good to see you. Yeah, I'm a bit lost for words, but it's good to see you. Thanks for having me back.
You don't agree? You don't agree? It's more expensive having a relationship with a device or a computer than it is with a human.
Well, yeah. What I was going to say is that my wife and I celebrated our 8th anniversary yesterday, and we got a dinner reservation this Friday. So in light of what you and Zoltan have just said, I might go cheapskating and just cancel the reservation and go back to my very intimate relationship with ChatGPT. But then I suppose ChatGPT might be having to your point about cheating, the same intimate relationship with just about 300 million other people. So I'm not entirely sure whether that counts as cheating or not. Of course, and one final point to get this going and especially get Bill going. You can see me at the Boston Logan Airport, my spiritual home. And I have to confess, and I've had that intimate relationship for nearly 20 years to my intimate relationship with the New England Patriots. I've disclosed it to my wife before she married me, so I believe we're good on that front. And on that note, yeah, it's great to be here, and perhaps we will even get to talk gambling, not just intimate relationships.
Excellent. So, look, we're at the end of the year, so this is always the good one at the end of the year because we kind of recap, all the developments over the last year, and then talk about predictions for 2026. Bill, before we dive in, I'll give you the stage.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good to be here with you, Zoltan. Thanks for having us. And Martin, always a pleasure, except when you're in that shirt. Jeremy, Martin invited me because he's always gracious and a good friend to both of us. he invited me to go to the game last night. I couldn't because, as you can imagine, I'm drinking out of a fire hose with the transition with the new governor in New Jersey, so I couldn't make it. But listen, I get the kibitzing. I just can't even fathom anybody having an intimate relationship with AI. I don't have one. I do use it periodically. Not a super nimble guy with it, but in just 10 days, I'll be in Puerto Rico at Nickel G's doing a lecture with 2 state senators from Oklahoma and New Hampshire on AI with a bunch of AI experts. So certainly the world's changing. I think the interesting thing about what Zoltan just shared with us in that report is when you combine AI with robotics, God forbid what that turns into in terms of intimate relationships. I think AI is a powerful tool, but we have to get across with regulators and legislators how they can put some belts and suspenders on it to prevent a lot of harm that could be caused when AI is used for criminal activity and other mischief.
Totally agree, and that's always the balance, right? Balancing, putting guardrails on it versus the positives and how it
right.
That's always the challenge.
Exactly.
All right, guys. Long list of topics that we can talk about. Unless either of you have a preference where to start. If not, I can just tee it up. All right. I thought we'd start talking about the flavor of the month, so to speak. And there's a lot to talk about around prediction markets. And some argue this is the new sort of in the U.S. the new like sweepstakes, right? Topic that's on the edge of regulation, conflict between state and feds. You overlay the politics of it on the federal level, and then you have on the commercial side just a lot happening. And I'll just to tee up, I think how important a segment of the industry this is, right? Underdog just withdrew. They just were approved for a mobile sports wagering license in Missouri, and then like within days decided to withdraw from the licensed sports wagering market in Missouri because they intend to offer prediction markets in Missouri instead. So obviously the economics for an operator, are militating in favor of, prediction markets versus licensed sports betting on the state level. So I'll just throw it over to you guys to kind of kick around what you think, what do you think's happening, what do you think's going to happen, and then we can kind of go through some of the legal issues, unless it's going to bore people, and the litigation and where things stand in that sense. But like, what are your thoughts? Is this going to overtake licensed sports betting on the state level?
I suppose if I may go first, and I'm sure Bill, just like me, will have strong views. To your underdog example, I think purely commercially, with all due respect to the Missouri sports betting regulation, and indeed the operative part is purely commercially, it makes sense because it's a federal license. And of course, we can debate, and I'm sure we will, the clash between federal and state laws that have a prominent role to play here. But if, as an operator, and I appreciate that to quite some extent, I might be oversimplifying it, I can rely on one license to serve a country of 330 plus million. Of course, not everyone is of age to gamble, but it's a huge country. One license, then I'll use the operative part again. Purely commercially, it makes perfect sense, especially for someone like Underdog, who, as you will recall, they've got a largely, in my book, thriving DFS or DFS 2.0, whatever you may want to call it, operations. They've, of course, tried their hands with the state-regulated sports betting and would appear to have struggled because, at the risk of stating the obvious, yet again, DraftKings and FanDuel dominate that market. As a former competition lawyer, I shouldn't be using the expression dominate, but still, it's a fact. They, between the two of them, have by far the largest market share. So I suppose coming into misery, it's a bit of a bizarre way of doing it. I don't know, hedging their bets, just come in, get the license, and then decide it might not be the right way to go. So I suppose what I'm trying to say, that's certainly a trend that we have perceived across the market. The established sports betting and clearly also DFS 2.0 / sports betting operators have kept a very close eye on the prediction market space, and they need to react because purely politically, and again, I'm sure Bill will have even more to say about that. It's very clear that as long as this administration, or well, the Trumps are in the White House, I just can't see the CFTC, the prediction markets regulator, to change the course and all of a sudden decide that these markets might be illegal, of course, and that is the final point. It begs the question, what impact, what effect the litigation that the state regulators have launched against prediction markets in many states, including the likes of, well, most recently, the hottest case seems to be the one in Nevada, what role that will play and whether it has or has not the power to dissuade the prediction markets operators from servicing the whole country. At the same time, and that I promise is the very final point, now the likes of FanDuel and DraftKings, they've made it very clear to their investors and the public that now they're coming into that space. So, very long story short, it's certainly providing for a fascinating dynamic in the market, sports betting market, that we all thought would have been largely regulated and now seems to be, in a way, re-regulated, creating new regulated channels. Or are they regulated, Bill? What do you think?
There we go. Okay. Pardon me, I'm driving for the audience. Yeah, Martin, I embrace everything you just said. I think the frustration is, and Martin, you and I have done many regulatory tours throughout the U.S., perhaps outside the U.S., but I think there's frustration amongst regulators and what I would call tier 2 operators outside of the two dominant forces that you mentioned. These folks have paid massive amounts of money for licensing, for compliance, for integrity. But the two dominant forces are already investing in PM. And I think the frustration is there's many states that haven't embraced this from a state regulatory standpoint, either, iGaming or online sports betting. Most states have passed sports betting of some sort, either retail or both retail and digital. The frustration is this the CFTC equipped to police this and regulate it? Because it does need a lot of oversight. And so that's a big question in my mind. I have spent a lot of time, as I'm sure the two of you have, over the last 12 months, talking to PM companies, but not yet jumping into the space because of the state regulators being, for the most part, adverse to it. So I like to be careful and cautious, although, many others, unlike you guys, would just jump in to make a money grab. I think there's definitely going to be a change coming soon. But what I would say is for the next 3 years, for sure, I would say the prediction markets are going to become more and more stable and more and more legitimized, if you will. And that has to do with the politics of this, separate from the legal aspects, because this is a classic states' rights versus federal government comity and all those issues that we dealt with, all of us previously, in the lead up to the repeal of PASPA by the Supreme Court in that 10-year campaign that we were involved with. The fact that Donald Trump Jr. serves on the board of Kalshi, is an advisor to Kalshi. That's all going to inure to the benefit of the existing prediction market companies. And I don't see that changing. The fact that the president has had a couple of hiccups with his appointments to the CFTC, I don't think really matters much. Because right now, I don't think the state attorney generals going after the PMs have been all that successful, unlike what's been done with sweepstakes and social, where there's been a large-scale effort by the AGA and many others to shut them down. That's been a successful venture. But I think prediction markets are here to stay. The question becomes, how they're going to have oversight and whether the CFTC can come up with an elegant solution to instill confidence, not only in regulating the predictive market companies, but also in how you police integrity.
Yeah, if I may add a couple of points on the back, with Jeremy's kind permission, on the back of what Bill has just said. And as always, I totally share the sentiment. So it's rather food for thought. I may not, at least at this stage, have definite answers. Indeed, to Bill's point about integrity, I suppose prediction markets, it might be a little naive, but if we projected ourselves 5, 6, perhaps 7, 8 years by now in the history of online gambling, it's not as though the companies hadn't cared about their patrons. They did, but it's also fair to say, and we've discussed this particular point at this forum numerous times, like the responsible gambling at that point was never on top of any agendas. And of course, we've perceived a sea change in the last 6, 7 years by now. So that's my first rather question, if not a point. Will the prediction markets have to embark upon a similar trajectory? And I believe in the interest, and I'm not trying to patronize anyone, but in the interest of the long-term sustainability of those markets, they might want to address responsible gambling, indeed integrity, in particular in light of all the recent sports, pro and college sports-related scandals. So that is the first point. Indeed, this White House setup is most likely here to stay for the next 3 and a bit years, which begs the question whether at the end of this term, prediction markets, they'll set it. Are they here to stay? Most likely, because by then it will most definitely be, as they say in French, a fait accompli. It's a done deal. So why fix it if it may, the operative part being may, is not broken? And I suppose the final factor that I would like to bring into play here is that Kalshi, I haven't seen any polymarket ones, but I'm sure they will be hot on Kalshi's heels, have now started advertising on TV. And just like in the case of sports betting operators, I believe the other practical and critical factor is to what extent 6 months further down the track, the public itself might get just a little fed up with all these adverts and perhaps take a similar stance on the Kalshi adverts as it clearly has on the adverts of, let's call it traditional sports betting operators. So I believe, in other words, there's this practical aspect as to how the public will start reacting to the potential flood of advertising, and whether that will end up reflected in people's minds, folks' minds, and folks are ultimately voters with the midterms and other, state elections coming up in 2026. So I believe that this cocktail of factors will have a role to play throughout 26, 27, and clearly beyond.
That's interesting. I haven't seen the Kalshi ads, so I don't know whether they're focused on sports only or other event markets. But it seems to me that it's gonna be a challenge for the CFTC to put guardrails in place, a la advertising, responsible gambling, integrity, the things that we in the sports betting world are concerned about. And differentiate the sports events markets from other prediction contracts, right? Because that's almost an acknowledgement that it's something other than a weather event or the outcome of an election or who's going to win the Oscars, and to put regulations in place that treat a particular market within the commodities world differently may be a bit of a challenge, but we shall see. But there is a lot at stake, right? I mean, if you're an operator, and whether you're a tier one operator or some startup that is not licensed as a sports betting operator, I mean, there are huge advantages, right? Number one, the age minimum age requirement is 18, not 21, right? You have 50 state market, so you have tremendous liquidity. There are tax advantages. You're not paying a state gaming tax like 51% in New York. And on the customer side, if you're lucky, your winnings are getting capital gains tax treatment. You're not paying income tax on winnings. So there are huge advantages commercially to doing it, and so I think that's going to put a real stress on this whole thing. So.
Oh,
yeah, and
sorry,
what I would add, Jeremy, Kalshi's up, poly markets are up advertising, and it's going to scale, and it's not just on sport. But, if you go back and look, for example, at the governor's race in New Jersey, this is going to have a huge impact on public opinion polling, because the poly markets and Kalshi and Robinhood and Crypto.com all got the New Jersey governor's election correct. None of the polls did. The public opinion, internal and press-related independent third-party polls. So, I mean, that's, I think, a positive, right? Because they were more accurate than the traditional political pollsters. The other problem with it is, the CFTC is equipped with sort of regulating and monitoring, sort of stock exchange type commodities, and policing that. They don't have the experience of the bandwidth. That they can certainly adopt it to provide consumer protection, responsible gaming, AML issues, and the like, in addition to integrity monitoring. But I think that's a problem that can be solved. The question is, what if they don't, from the jump, address it? Once they fully come across and regulate it, there can be some real bad looks there, and the whole kingdom can come tumbling down. And that's the concern I have. Look, at the end of the day, dealing with stocks is like Billy Walters said, Jeremy, you know, I've talked about this, is very much like betting on sports. It's the same thing, right? The question becomes, is the advantage that you just outlined very elegantly, Jeremy, to the consumer, to the operator, in terms of taxes and other advantages, does that require the CFTC to be a little bit more vigilant about how they regulate this? Because obviously the more regulation, some of the advantages will go away. But a big advantage to the consumer is what you just pointed out, is dealing with this as a capital gains as opposed to an income event.
Yeah. And, and they can nibble around the edges of things like, consumer protection, RG kinds of issues. But it seems to me the big one that is going to be a real challenge is the integrity piece, because at least with state licensed sports betting, we know that integrity is a big piece of it. Operators are talking to the sports leagues, are sharing information with regulators, and that would be a heavy lift for the CFTC to impose those kinds of requirements on I'll call them operators, but on the PM companies. So
if I may, in that vein, to follow up on the points that you two have just made, I suppose one, and I agree, good old Billy Walters, that there's not a huge difference between, in practical terms, sports betting and, for want of better expression, playing on the stock exchange. But then I believe there is a regulatory or statutory difference. Because, as you pointed out, Jeremy, when it comes to prediction markets, we're talking about derivatives. So the legislation assumes the assumption of risk from the consumer perspective, whereas betting in that regard is different. So that begs the question, whether, as the likes of Kalshi have tried to argue, it's mostly, if not fully, on the customer. He or she is aware of the risks. Whereas in the sports betting world, the responsible gambling and integrity concepts are much more developed, so there's much more onus on the operator.
Right.
And I'm not judging the ethics of it. So I'm looking at it from the pure legislative perspective. Yeah, it would be both a smart business and regulatory decision to address that point. But right now, and I hate to say that, but what seemed to be coming out of Kalshi and others is, well, the people who come to our sites, they assume the risk and they're supposed to be aware of it. It may and it might not be sustainable in the long run. I suppose right now, unless it's addressed by the regulator, it's not a carte blanche. It's a getaway clause. I think I would be inclined to bear that in mind. Regarding integrity, indeed, some of the more exotic markets, they're exciting, I suppose, to bet upon, like films, music, of course, politics, and what have you. But how could we go about the integrity? A sports game can be much more efficiently managed in that regard. And a final point I was going to say, to come full circle, coming back to the traditional sports betting operators. As you both would know better than I would these days, like a number of regulators, including the likes of one of my favorites, Ohio, have come out and warned their license holders that if they were to go and have any dealings, partnerships, any connection, nexus whatsoever with the prediction markets, they might be running a risk of losing the license. And I suppose, yet again, from the pure regulatory perspective, it is quite smart because, with all due respect, it tends to sidestep the federal v. state laws issue. As a state betting regulator or gaming regulator, I might have a view, but I may not have a formal authoritative opinion as to whether prediction markets are legal or not. But what I'm saying is that those within my regulated fold should steer clear to prevent any such risk. At the same time, without trying to be overly cynical, that's why I've said that I might be coming full circle. The original question about underdog, pure commercial perspective. One licensed for 50 states, at least for now, or state by state licensing. And some of these states are telling me, oh, don't explore the other potential opportunity because you might get the license. So I suppose in some quarters, they may, or even already may have, come to the conclusion that they may want to get ahead of that. And again, with all due respect, just ditch the state's licenses and stick to the CFTC one to see what will happen. Because, and therein lies the paradox, I believe, and that's why it's quite schizophrenic for the traditional betting operators. The pure prediction market operators, here's the question, could they just benefit from it because they won't be in this schizophrenic position? Shall I stay or shall I go? Yeah. Will I run the risk of losing my sports betting licenses, at least in some states, if I go down the prediction markets route? Or could it actually pay off because I'd be making so much money?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. And there really is tremendous potential upside, even beyond just sports, right? As I think about it, what's to prevent, because these CDMs self-certify, right, the events. So what's to prevent someone from offering a market on online slots, right? Almost like a back bet or a bet behind. You're streaming someone playing a slot machine. Are they going to hit a jackpot? So the potential goes beyond just sports betting. Yeah.
Yeah. Although I suppose very, very briefly, yes. But then couldn't the states the states that have chosen not to regulate slot machines and other casino games, perhaps just yet, so they remain prohibited, could they have a more slam dunk case against these operators? Whereas sports betting is a little iffy. But I see what you're saying, because the federal regulatory logic would still be the same. It's a prediction market, so as long as it hits all the prerequisites, it largely does not matter what the underlying set of factors is. It might be the Giants winning the Super Bowl by 2035, or it might be a slot machine simulator.
Right. Or it could be, the chances of Jeremy getting hit by a car when he's crossing the street. It could be anything, right?
Yeah, which fingers crossed are zero. But.
Let's hope. So, hey, Bill, I wanted to ask you because I know you're involved with a bit with what's going on in New Jersey with the transition. Since New Jersey major gaming market was one of only 2 states that had a gubernatorial election, do you want to very briefly touch on anything you think the impact of a change in administration will have on gaming in New Jersey?
Yeah, sure, Jeremy. Thank you for asking. We had a very robust election, and even the 2 candidates were surprised at the outcome. I don't think Mikey Sherrill was surprised that she won, but the number she won by, because most polling had it at 2 to 3 points. The internals had it that way. So those polls were all wrong. She won by 14.5 points, over 500,000 votes, and over 3 million cast. It was the largest turnout for a governor's election in modern history, 60 years. And, you know, I'm just going to be candid here. I'm not being overtly political or overtly Democrat, but it was a big anti-Trump vote. And when Trump's not on the ballot, you know, he does well when he's on the ballot, at least 2 out of 3 times. When he's not on the ballot, he usually has a pretty negative impact. You're seeing that even now bleed out across the country. For example, today, Jeremy, Tuesday, December 2nd, we have the first congressional race after the 2 gubernatorials in Virginia, New Jersey, and the New York City race in Tennessee. And that district, which had a vacancy, was a Trump 23 plus point district. And that race is going into today as a dead heat. I don't think the Democrat wins, but if they do, that's going to be earth shattering. And you're going to continue to see things like you saw post-election day with Marjorie Taylor Greene announcing her resignation, which was shocking to the world. And that has a lot to do with the Epstein files and all that. Back to Jersey, Mikey Sherrill, who won with a mandate for sure and picked up 5 seats in the lower house. The Democrats now have a super majority of 59 to 21 in the House and 24 to 16 in the Senate. That House is a super majority. But Mikey Sherrill had some problems ahead of her. I don't think the honeymoon will last long because of the huge budget deficit and the fact that Mikey on the campaign trail spoke pretty affirmatively about not raising taxes. She didn't get specific, but she was more focused on affordability issues. She's going to have a tough time balancing this budget without massive cuts and without a tax increase. And third point is, you know, the Trump's one big, whatever you want to call it, bill, is going to provide a lot of pressure on states like New Jersey and Virginia because of Medicaid cuts. And that has huge impact, not only on the populace, but on the state budget. The other point, for those who care about lottery or DFS or horse racing or casino, poker, sports betting, the DGE, you know, we have a new administration coming in. There'll be a new attorney general announced in the next few weeks. That's usually one of the first offices, you know, the 3 constitutional offices, the AG, Secretary of State, which was announced already. It'll be the Lieutenant Governor, Dale Caldwell, and the Treasurer. Those will all be announced by Christmas. And the Attorney General will have a big say in what the DG looks like post January 20th when Mikey Sherrill gets sworn in. And, you know, Attorney General Plotkin has been all over the predictive markets and sweepstakes. Nobody knows because we don't know who the next AG is going to be officially, what that Attorney General may think or look like. But I know that Mikey Sherrill is looking for an AG that's going to push back against Trump. So that gives you a little peek under the curtain of what the future looks like.
Do you see any risk to the gaming taxes being increased?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big risk. I think not only to the gaming taxes, but also to what we did this year with DFS +2. They're now taxed. They weren't before. And so they're at risk, as well as all the gaming taxes are at risk. And one final point, Jeremy, which puts, you know this, and so does Martin, I just lucked out because I had 2 clients that won. You know, there were 8 submissions, and then we came down to 3 in the end. The downstate New York City retail licenses were all awarded yesterday. My client Bally's and Hard Rock both won, thank God. And Genting got the other one. 2 in Queens, 1 in the Bronx. That's a little bit beneficial to New Jersey because it's not so close. But New Jersey's got, and Mikey Sherrill is getting educated on this, Jersey's got a real task ahead of them to decide whether they're going to ever do, what I would say upstate casino licenses. Because if they don't, we're going to bleed 20 to 25% of the market to New York. Because it's far easier to ride to Queens than it is to AC.
Yeah, from North Jersey for sure. Yeah. All right. Interesting. So we have midterms next year. Probably a good time. We have 10 or 15 minutes left to talk about the impact or potential impact, what you guys think of the federal midterm elections on gaming issues. I know that there's the SAFE Act is kicking around at the federal level to impose all sorts of restrictions on sports betting, advertising restrictions, deposit limits, this kind of stuff, national self-exclusion list. What do you think the chances of that passing are, and whether what may happen in the midterms will have an impact on that?
Big time. Well, first of all, there's today's election in Tennessee, which is the start, right? Then you have Mikey Sherrill's seat. Okay, she's resigned already, effective last Thursday, the Thursday before Thanksgiving, 2 Thursdays ago. That election, the primary is now February 5th. The general is now April 16th. Then there's another primary in June and the general election in the midterms. That'll be the first sort of mover to see where things go because, that could be a Republican seat, but I don't think in light of what happened just a month ago on November 4th, that's likely. I think the Democrats have a very good chance to take the majority in the House. I think it's far harder in the Senate, although not impossible. But, let's say, arguendo, both houses go Democrat and both houses pass the SAFE Act, right? There's no chance in hell Trump's going to sign it. And there's no chance in hell they'll have majorities to override it. So I think if the SAFE Act has any chance, it's in 2029 after the 28 presidential race.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So even as Bill suggested, even if the setup, the Congress changes, and it would indeed be very difficult for the Democrats to flip the Senate, certainly stand a far better chances in the House, despite all the gerrymandering that the Republicans have done, and those only too acutely aware of. We talked about it the other day by having read a fascinating book about that, but I would be going off tangent. So I suppose that act will not be shelved, but it might need to wait its time. At the same time, I believe and we touched upon that briefly, what is coming into play here, once again, very sadly, if not tragically, and most definitely unfortunately, the betting scandals across multiple leagues. So I'm not here, far from my intention to do that, to give the likes of the federal legislators any tips.
So
they might be looking into that already, but if I were to try to lobby for the SAFE Act, then I would be inclined to reflect a response, be it a task force or more stringent rules around sports integrity in the Act. It would not be a free rider, because ultimately it's about the sports betting or the wider gambling space, perhaps to stand a better chance of getting the votes in both chambers. But as Bill said, to yet again come full circle, it's like snowball's chance in hell that the sitting president would sign that. 3 years from now, perhaps.
The politics aside, and the likelihood of Trump signing it, putting all that aside, the two of you are sort of experts in this area when it comes to consumer protection and responsible gaming and these kinds of things and integrity. So politics aside, is the SAFE Act a good thing in terms of federal oversight? Do we want to be there, or do we not want to be there?
No. So first of all, I give a lot of credit to Martin because we were the only ones that went in and met with the sponsors of the bill. So, Paul Tonko, who's a fabulous guy, he hails from the area that has the great racetrack in upstate New York. So it's a little shocking. He's a mental health guy. Blumenthal's a very reasonable guy, an attorney by profession, former prosecutor. I think, the pathway to hell is always paved with good intentions. This bill is well intended. It's a horrible bill. Terrible. I don't want the federal government sticking their nose into this issue. I think the states have gotten it right, and we'll have to see with prediction markets where that goes. But this bill tries to accomplish some things like advert bans, a national self-exclusion list, which is a good thing. I think it's best left to the states. The other thing I will say as an exclamation point, nobody's talked about this, and I'm shocked. What Mike DeWine did, the governor of Ohio, former U.S. Senator, Republican governor, great guy. He signed the sports betting law in Ohio, years ago, and Ohio's had a really great track record. But he said just last week he regrets signing that bill. He regrets allowing that. And so I don't know how other governors are looking at that, but hopefully it doesn't become a domino effect, because this whole thing could collapse. And I blame the industry, okay? And I'm a part of the industry. We have not done a great job telling our story. We have a great story to tell: taxes, jobs, integrity, monitoring consumer protection, responsible gaming. Really great story to tell, but we're not telling it. We're allowing some of the dodgy folks out there trying to take advantage of, the challenged in addiction to try to make a point and put money in their pockets. I'm hoping Governor DeWine peels back a little bit, but he's been on a rampage the last week with that announcement.
Yeah, 2 points I would pick out there and give them even bigger boost. One, and just like Bill, I'm a big believer in the 10th Amendment, especially in this sector. But as we know, all the regulators, and at the political level, of course, the governors, they talk to each other. So as opposed to federal regulation, I would very humbly suggest that besides the potential nationwide self-exclusion list, our friends and colleagues amongst the regulators and their staff may want to have a chat about other forms of collaboration and other areas where they could get together to make the sports and ultimately online gambling or gaming industry an even better and even safer place. Most of them, if not all of them, have got a plenty of experience by now, and I would like to think that, brushing the politics of it aside, they're bound to be singing from the same hymn sheet when it comes to consumer protection. So I suppose in human speak, what I'm trying to say, the potential nationwide self-exclusion list would be a great start, but much more needs to be done that would indeed, as Bill suggested, resolve the issues that the immaculate misconception, let me call it that, with all due respect I can muster of the, say, Bad Act on the federal level is trying to accomplish. Don't fix the underlying setup because it ain't broken. It just needs to get much more efficient when it comes to collaboration across state lines. And I'm not saying it's easy. 40 plus states have regulated sports betting. I know the likes of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, all the like-minded, or New England, all the like-minded East Coast states. Perhaps they could take the lead and work with the likes of the Midwest states and many others to get this done. And the other point that I would like to highlight, and as I've said, give yet another boost. As an industry, Bill and I might be sounding like very broken records by now, but we're still not good enough. And just like Bill, just like you, Jeremy, I am part of this industry. We're still not good enough at shouting from the proverbial rooftops about the good, the great stuff we have done. And it will not, it's not a stroke of magic wand. It will not make the negative headlines disappear, or at least not instantly. But to stick to my theme and the pattern here, it's a great way to start. We pay a lot in taxes. We got powerful technology, robust consumer protection measures. We've generated jobs directly and indirectly. Sponsorships and whatnot. Perhaps even, and I appreciate that it's not necessarily a habit here in the States, and I totally respect that, but even bake in both positive and negative examples from other jurisdictions around the world, because we're also ultimately talking, in most cases, when it comes to the captains of this industry, about large publicly listed behemoths of companies. So these 2 points, perhaps, because Zoltan will know best, but we might be running out of time. But these are the 2 critical points that I would pick out from what Bill has said when it comes to US regulation. 1, state regulators do get together, talk about, if not nationwide, get it going, get a critical mass of 3, 4, 5 states, and get the ball rolling when it comes to especially consumer protection, but some of the other stuff as well, KYC, cybersecurity, all that jazz. And as an industry, let's make a fresh start in 26 when it comes to delivering the good news stories that we have generated. Well, appreciate that there's still work to be done to address some of the less good news stories.
Totally agree with both of you. It seems like every few months when we have this conversation, it's the same thing, that the industry has just done a terrible job of delivering the message, speaking with one unified voice. And that seems to be the thing that's holding us back. So let's hope that 2026 is different. All right, last question, because we're just about out of time. 2026 iGaming legislation predictions. Any new states? New York, Maryland, Ohio, Illinois, or dead?
Ooh, we always get this wrong.
It's like a prediction market.
Exactly, I was going to say, if you pardon the pun, yeah, predictions about predictions. In light of all the other issues we've got on our plate, I think it's unfortunately unlikely, also in light of the fact that the potential frontrunners like New York, we've touched upon downstate casinos. So it's the critical question that I would love to be wrong about, but I don't see right now too much movement. At the same time, and I've made this point at this forum a number of times, and I'm still a big believer in my theory to the fact that if we fix RG and the wider consumer protection piece, well, as an industry, give ourselves a much better chance to get the other side of the house, namely online gaming, online casino regulated in more states, I mean.
Bill, what say you?
Yeah. I'll try to be tight. Jeremy, thank you for moderating. Here's what I would say, because I like to leave with a bang, and I think it's an important one. I've been saying for 20 years now, the most important department in each operator's company after security of a license is government affairs. Now, everybody thinks I say that because it's self-serving, because that's a majority of what I do. But let me just give you one quick example. TikTok, Google, Microsoft, all the Amazon, all the major companies, global companies that are in the States have been very successful because they have proactive government affairs, not reactive. I'll give you one quick example. And this is what clients pay me for, but I'm giving this to the audience. Watch states which are starting to move digital tax law, meaning every digital transaction will have a tax on it on top of income and corporate and all that, because states are struggling. And that tax will impact not only Roblox and social media companies, but it will impact every gaming company that has a digital functionality to it. And if you think you're going to jump in after the bill gets dropped and then hire some two-bit lobbyist who's never accomplished anything or knows nothing about gaming, good luck. I'll leave it at that, and I'll say there's very little chance we're going to see any movement in 26 in iGaming, unfortunately. I hope I'm wrong.
All right. On that happy note, I think we're just at about time. Out of time.
Yeah.
Zoltan, back over to you. Thanks as always for having us. This was fun. Guys, thank you
so much, guys. Bill, without stealing your thunder, Jeremy, what's your vision of 2026? Because you moderated the whole year, and I also want to know your opinion on next year.
No,
Jeremy's in his happy, safe place.
I'm with the guys on this one. Yeah, I shouldn't say anything. I want the guys on this one.
All right.
I think we're going to see any major iGaming legislation this year. For those of us who have tried to predict, and we're asked all the time, what new states are going to launch online casino, in the next year, in the next 2 years. Everyone always has their sort of usual list of suspects, and then we're always wrong. The legislation dies, doesn't get out of committee, it doesn't have a snowball's chance in hell of advancing for a whole variety of reasons. So I'm gonna be cynical on this one as well. So 2026 not gonna be a good year for iGaming expansion.
All right. That's how we ended on the happy note. So thank you guys for this whole year again. We've been doing this for 5 years now, so it's good to have this tradition going. We will be back, of course, next year with this series. I'm saying goodbye to you guys. If you're watching this recording, make sure to subscribe to our channels and keep receiving notifications, because we almost hit 1,000 videos this year. So there's quite a lot of gallery to go through. Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you very much.